Some mistakes are simply impossible to fix, and it was exactly such a mistake that completely changed Kong Shiru's student life. 5 hours before it happened, she got a message from the class president saying they were about to receive the bomber jackets. The girl was a second-year student at the industrial design faculty. She arrived earlier than the announced time. Suddenly, Shiru's attention was drawn to a girl carrying 3 large boxes. They started to fall, and she couldn't hold them. It was the class president. Shiru decided to help her. Approaching, she asked if those were the faculty bombers. Shiru said she would help carry the boxes to the entrance. The girl picked up 2 boxes. It was unexpected. Walking ahead, the girl added for Shiru to take the last box. The class president admired the girl's height. While walking, the president introduced herself as Park Si-ho and added they could speak informally, since she was younger. Leaving the building, Shiru pointed at a bench under a tree and asked if she could put the boxes there. Hurrying after her, Si-ho remarked that the girl was quite strong. The president was impressed by this trait. Shiru shared that she used to play soccer for some time. This intrigued Park Si-ho. It seemed like she wanted to ask more. Then some second-year industrial design students approached them. They were excited to finally get their bombers. They couldn't wait to see and receive their bombers. The girl rushed to unpack one of the boxes. Opening it, Shiru saw that all the bombers were pink. The whole second year was surprised by this color. Everyone was puzzled. After all, they had ordered black bombers. Maybe it wasn't their batch, or there was a production mistake. Unfolding one of them, they saw their university name, Berry and Industrial Design Department. Shiru asked Si-ho to double-check whether they really got their order. Maybe it was an issue with the company. The guys began to voice their complaints toward Park Si-ho, which made her look very confused. The guys still couldn't calm down, so Shiru asked them to quiet down while the class president called the company. Si-ho said it was probably an order mistake. Suddenly, Seol Kibaek, a classmate, came up from behind. He asked what had happened with their course bombers, which startled Shiru so much. Turning to him, she lightly hit him, saying she'd asked him many times not to do that. This chaos was interrupted by Si-ho. She said it wasn't the company's fault, and they refused to refund the money. Hearing this, the guys got very upset, saying they wouldn't wear pink bombers they hadn't even ordered. One guy showed the bomber to Kibaek and asked what they should do about this pink color. Seol Kibaek took the jacket and said it was actually pretty cute. He liked pink, so he felt lucky. The other guys kept grumbling. There were many guys on the faculty. Were they all supposed to wear pink? A classmate named Gukwa came up to Shiru. He asked if their black bombers had arrived yet. Taking another bomber from the box, the girl explained there had been a color mistake in production. Putting it on, he said he didn't know whose idea it was, but now he adored the person who picked pink. Third-year students walking by expressed admiration for the industrial design department's bombers. Some guys from the course concluded that maybe it was even good that the jackets were pink. They would stand out. The guys slowly started to agree that pink wasn't so bad. One by one, they accepted it. The girl suggested handing out the bombers. As Shiru turned toward the crowd, she bumped into someone. It was her classmate, Cho Cheong. She hadn't expected to see him at the distribution of bombers for the entire course. Until then, she had never stood this close to him, and from that distance, he seemed very tall. Shiru asked if he had come for a bomber. He nodded and asked for the largest size. Handing him the right size, she explained there had been a color mix-up at the factory. But if he didn't like it, he could personally file a request to the company to exchange the bomber jacket. Holding it, the guy said it actually looked cute and asked if she was the class president. Shiru didn't expect him to like pink. She replied she wasn't the president and asked why he was asking. With an indifferent look, Chung asked why she cared so much if it wasn't even her responsibility. Suddenly, Kibaek interrupted, asking if Chung could join them. The guy declined. Kibaek asked Shiru the same. She told him to wait. She turned her head, searching for Si-ho. She finally saw her. Coming up, the girl said there weren't many left and Si-ho could manage by herself. Kibaek, waiting for Shiru, started counting seconds until she caught up with him and the group. Walking ahead, Gukwa suggested to his friends they play soccer after a group dinner that evening. One by one, the guys said they were busy, but Shiru said she was free, though Gukwa would be busy. The guy didn't get what she meant, but the girl reminded him that tomorrow was the deadline for the report. He had completely forgotten, so he asked Shiru if she had done hers so he could borrow it. The girl just wanted to have dinner and leave. Back then, no one imagined that very incident would happen to any of them. She remembered very clearly what happened 3 minutes before the incident. Someone's male hands were shaking her by the shoulders. Shiru knew him. The girl asked if tall girls like her weren't his type. A man's voice denied it. The girl didn't believe it. Shiru asked again if someone like her could ever attract him, considering her height. He agreed. Then she asked what about a relationship. The man's voice calmly answered that it was also possible. Taking the guy's face in her palms, she asked if he wouldn't mind a kiss. In response, there was silence. Without waiting long for an answer, Shiru moved closer to his lips. In turn, he leaned toward her too. 10 hours after the incident, the girl woke up, asking herself if what she saw last was just a dream. Seeing that it was already 9:30 on the clock, Shiru remembered she had to be at the first class that day. For a moment, the girl raised her head and looked in the mirror. She saw a red mark on her lower lip. She thought it might be tint, but she didn't have such a bright red color. But there was no time to find out. In a rush, the girl packed her things for university. Only her phone was missing. It seemed to be on the bed. Reaching the bed, Shiru saw a sticky note on the headboard. How did it get there? She definitely didn't put it herself. The note said he left first, but what did that even mean? Who was he? And how did he get here? But she left these questions for later. There was no time now. Shiru was already late for university. Standing in front of the classroom door, the girl couldn't go in because she didn't know if the professor was there. Suddenly, Cho Cheong sneaked up behind Shiru. He said she was late, which startled her a lot. Walking ahead, the guy told her she could come in without worry, since the professor wasn't there. That calmed her down. Suddenly, Shiru imagined how it must look from the outside if they entered together. It would surely draw attention. She decided she needed to hide somehow, so she pulled up her hood and tightened the strings over her face. But it didn't help at all. Her friends noticed and said she tried to hide, but her height gave her away. One of the guys added that she was lucky, since the professor hadn't yet done roll call. The girl greeted everyone. Sitting in her place, Shiru noticed Kibaek's watchful gaze. She smiled and separately greeted him. But the guy answered shortly and indifferently. Today, Seol Sunbae looked even angrier than usual. Noticing the red mark on his lip, she asked what happened. Maybe Kibaek had bumped into something. Gukwa told her that Kibaek had mentioned fighting with someone last night, but didn't say who it was. Suddenly, the guy jumped up and covered Gukwa's mouth with his hand. He threatened him to shut up. Shiru tried to calm him, saying that whatever happened, it must have been unpleasant. Keeping his hand on Gukwa's face, Kibaek asked the girl if she didn't remember anything. Shiru didn't understand. Putting together the memories of that mark on her lip, the note on the headboard, and that dream, the girl realized. It didn't make sense to her. This simply couldn't have happened. Shiru needed to clarify everything with the guys. During the break between classes, the girl took Gukwa to the backyard of the university, pressing him against the wall. She asked him what had happened last night. The guy answered he had no idea. The girl got angry. She asked if he remembered them drinking together yesterday. She didn't remember what happened after. Gukwa replied that she had invited them to drink. At dinner with friends, everything seemed fine. The guy's eyes widened. He guessed that she got drunk and hit Seol Kibaek. Then the puzzle fits together. These words made the girl even angrier. She also covered his mouth with her hand, just like Kibaek had done earlier. Returning from the yard, they didn't talk. Kwan asked if they had run outside just to argue. Shiru wanted to believe it wasn't really what it seemed. But everything pointed to one thing. She had kissed Kibaek. Probably he hadn't wanted it. After all, why else would his lip be injured? The professor returned to the classroom. The professor announced that starting today, the course would be divided into small groups to improve learning. Taking the list of students retaking the course, the professor called out Seol Kibaek's name. Seeing him at one of the desks, he asked if the guy remembered the first group project for this course. Kibaek replied that it was to make a sphere from styrofoam. The professor confirmed and showed the sphere. Then he asked how long it took to make. The student answered that it took about 17 hours. The professor noted that making a sphere with a diameter of 20 centimeters really did take that long. Hearing all this, Gukwa remarked that the second year was starting out way too hard. Shiru agreed, but the girl's thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't get over the idea that she had kissed Kibaek. What if she pretended she didn't remember anything because she had been too drunk? Those were cowardly thoughts. Maybe she should get on her knees and tearfully beg him for forgiveness. Her thoughts were interrupted by the professor. He announced that there were 6 students retaking the course, so there would be 6 groups. Then he called Siho. The professor asked her to announce the group members, adding that this would be their teams for the whole semester. Siru really didn't want to end up in the same group as Seol Kibaek. She listened carefully as the class president spoke. The members of the third group were Kong Shiru, Cha Gukwa, Cho Cheong, Seol Kibaek, and Park Siho. What could possibly go wrong? Siho was very happy that she and Siru were in the same group. She asked the girl to look after her. Siru wasn't thrilled. Chung sat down next to Kibaek. Suddenly, Gukwa asked what had happened to Kibaek's lip, which was covered with a bandage. Siru was curious, too, about how he could have hurt his lip. But she really didn't want to join in their conversation. Smiling, the guy added that anyone who saw them together would definitely think they'd bumped lips. Silence fell over the group. Everyone stared at Gukwa, who kept smiling, not understanding what was going on. Kibaek threatened him for his words, telling him to watch his tongue. Chung sat silently. Gukwa didn't understand why Kibaek got so angry. He said it was just a joke. Siru told him to shut up already. Kibaek interrupted the group's chatter by suggesting they finally decide on a day to start working on the model. He asked what everyone's schedules were like. One by one, they replied that they could start on Monday. President Siho noted that everyone had already agreed to start on Tuesday or Wednesday, and that worked for her too. Kibaek said that if everyone was free on Monday, then they could go to the workshop in the evening. Siru was still preoccupied with thoughts about the previous evening. She decided that after class, she'd talk to Kibaek. The guy wrapped things up by saying everything was settled and they finished quickly. He wanted to address Siru, but Gukwa interrupted him. He suddenly jumped up and shouted a suggestion to go to the internet cafe. This annoyed everyone. Kibaek raised his voice at him, telling him to be quiet for once, to have some respect, and not to interrupt others. Gukwa mumbled something, but Kibaek yelled that he wanted to talk to Kong Shiru. He was very angry. No one expected that, not even Siru herself. She was about to leave, but froze when she heard this. The girl felt uneasy. Did he really want to talk here, in front of everyone, about their kiss last night? Suddenly, her phone rang. It was perfect timing. She needed a way to escape this conversation. Showing her phone, the girl said she had an important call, so she'd go talk and then come back. Without waiting, Kibaek ran after her, ignoring Gukwa, who was still rambling about the internet cafe. When Kibaek slipped out the classroom door, Gukwa said he'd probably go home. Chung had already said goodbye. But Gukwa stopped him, saying that while Siru had distracted everyone, he remembered something Cho Cheong had asked him to do. Meanwhile, Siru ran behind the university building. She answered the call, trying to catch her breath. A voice on the phone asked why she was breathing so heavily. Calmly, she replied that she'd been running away from someone. The voice reminded her that she had promised to help tomorrow at 10 in the morning. She answered that she remembered. Then the person reminded her they had agreed to keep no secrets between them, so she had to tell. And so, Siru admitted that she had kissed a classmate. That's why she'd run away from him. The female voice on the phone laughed and wanted to know which of her classmates had gotten so lucky. She guessed, asking if it was the guy Siru liked. Seol Kibaek. She recalled his name. From Siru's silence, it was clear she'd guessed correctly. But then she asked if they'd already kissed, why run away? Was it mutual? Siru asked in return, if everything were so good, would she be suffering like this? The girl on the phone got curious. Then Siru started to tell what happened yesterday, starting from when they went to dinner with friends. On the way to the pizzeria, she mentioned she hadn't even thought he'd like the bomber jacket's pink color. She added that after his words, the whole group took the jackets. Kibaek said he'd done it by accident. The guy explained that if he'd said he didn't like the color, it would have spoiled the mood for everyone in the department. Then he said he didn't want to add trouble for their president, Siho, who already had too much to handle. The girl was surprised that he'd thought so much about it. It impressed her. How could she not fall for him? Sitting in the pizzeria, Seol Kibaek talked about a blind date that Kim Kwon-yeon had forced him to go on. He was asked if he'd liked the girl. He replied that she was sweet and kind, just too tall for him. Siru was already uncomfortable with this conversation, and hearing this made her even more embarrassed and stiff. The guy asked her not to tell Kwon-yeon what he'd just said. It's just that he had a very specific ideal type. Kibaek added that he'd never date someone from the same university. He didn't want to become the subject of gossip. Finishing, Kibaek noticed Siru sitting there with a gloomy expression. He asked if she was okay. The girl replied that she had no appetite. In truth, she'd lost it because of his words. The guy replied that if so, could he finish her cola? She didn't even have time to say anything. Kibaek was already holding the glass to his lips, saying it was no big deal if he touched it with his lips. He added that it wasn't a problem since they were just friends. At that moment, everything about them became clear to her. They played soccer, video games, and teased each other. To Seol Kibaek, she was just a faculty friend. She had never really counted on having a relationship with him. Maybe it really was better if they stayed just friends. When it was time to say goodbye, the friends split up. Shiru left with Gukwa and Kibaek went with Kwon. They all said goodbye. After walking a bit, Shiru said she really wanted to have some soju. That's how she and Gukwa ended up at a bar. But after the bar, he suddenly disappeared somewhere. And how did that strange situation with Seol Kibaek even happen? Hearing the story, the woman's voice on the phone laughed and then apologized for not believing it at first. Shiru told her that if she had seen Kibaek's face a few minutes ago, she wouldn't say that. Suddenly, a guy appeared nearby on the stairs. He asked why she had run away. He said he wanted to talk. As he caught up with Shiru, some girls from the web design department saw him and decided to spy. They were dying to find out what they would talk about so far from crowded places. The girls sneaked up to the stairs. Turning his head, Kibaek noticed them and, in a threatening tone, asked what they were doing there. The girls tried to make excuses. But pretty quickly, at his request, they left the stairs. The girls were annoyed by how he treated them. Turning back to the girl, Kibaek saw that she was about to run away again. He said this time she wouldn't escape. Walking down the stairs, the guy kept talking. He asked if she had run away because she had forgotten about last night. Shiru was nervous. Her hands were shaking, her palms were sweaty. She couldn't say a word, even though she wanted to apologize. Kibaek came very close and told her not to apologize. She was ready for anything. But not this. Then the guy added that he was the one who should apologize because he had said too much at dinner that had hurt her. Looking him in the eyes, Shiru asked what he meant. She hadn't expected an apology from him. Kibaek explained that he remembered what he had said and he was wrong. He had always spoken openly to her, like a friend. Nervously, he looked away from her and continued, saying he could never have imagined that she liked him. The girl blushed deeply and asked how he knew. Had someone told him everything? She couldn't imagine how she was supposed to look at him now, or how she'd keep going to university. Pointing to his injured lip, Kibaek said it already hurt quite badly. That made her turn away. She started banging her head against the wall, saying she deeply regretted what she'd done and would pay for it with blood. Pulling her back by the shoulder, the guy told her she'd already bruised her forehead enough. She looked at him and added that this was exactly what she deserved. A smile appeared on Kibaek's face. What made him smile? Stepping back, he raised his right hand, holding it out to Shiru. At first, she didn't understand why. But then Shiru extended her hand to Kibaek. Her hands were still trembling from all the shock of what had just happened. Shaking Kong Shiru's trembling hand, the guy said he would forgive her. So she had to forgive him too. Then he added that he would pretend he hadn't heard her confession. Something twisted painfully in the girl's chest. It dawned on Shiru that she had been rejected. But what had she expected? That the guy might have feelings for her too? Still holding her hand, he said that only thanks to her and Gukwa had his student life been so interesting. Of course, there was also Kwon Yeon, but without her, it wouldn't have been the same. He hoped she had felt that too. Covering her hand with his other palm, Kibaek said he wanted to keep talking like they had before. Quickly pulling her hand away, Shiru admitted that she had gotten drunk yesterday and messed everything up. Tears welled in her eyes. Seeing this, the guy gently touched her cheekbone. He wanted to comfort her, but she shut herself off. Suddenly, it began to rain. Kibaek lifted his hand to shield Shiru's forehead so the drops wouldn't hit her face. He asked if she had an umbrella. If not, they could go back to the faculty building to get his. The girl stepped back, took her bag, and asked if they were finished talking. Kibaek confirmed they were. Wishing him a good weekend, Shiru ran away from him as fast as she could. For him, this was quite unexpected. Kibaek wondered if it was okay to let Shiru go without an umbrella. It seemed everything had ended fairly well. Running home through the heavy rain, the girl ran into Cho Cheong. He was standing on the sidewalk under an umbrella. He called out to her, but she ran past without even looking back. The guy didn't understand what was wrong. The girl was caught up in her own thoughts. She was deeply embarrassed. She should have hidden it better. She had been rejected, and she hadn't even meant to confess. And she hadn't been able to deny Kibaek's words. It was true that this year had been amazing. So much so that she had decided not to drop out of university, and then she had fallen in love. But it wasn't mutual. Kibaek didn't feel the same. Her feelings meant nothing to him. Shiru tried to cheer herself up. It seemed everything had ended okay. He would pretend it never happened. The next day, the girl caught a cold. Well, if you run through heavy rain, of course you'll get sick. Thoughts about Seol Kibaek and that awful situation from 2 days ago crept back into her mind. Hearing her scream, Siru's mother asked if she was okay. The girl replied that she shouldn't worry about it. She decided she would bury herself in work and chores over the weekend, so nothing unnecessary would come to mind. Since yesterday, she'd turned off her phone in case Seol Kibaek wanted to text her. Maybe she should turn it on? Once she turned on the phone, all the messages started coming in. Siru covered her face so she wouldn't see them right away. When she opened her eyes, she saw messages from university group chats. Among them were messages from Gukwa. Why did she even hope? Seol Kibaek wouldn't text her. He didn't care. Siru opened the chat with Cha Gukwa. He wrote that when they were on their way to the bar, they ran into Chung, who had asked him to look after her. At that moment, Siru's mom knocked on the door, waiting for her daughter. There was no time to figure it out, so she left it for later. By Monday, Siru was standing outside the university building. All weekend, she'd been remembering the conversation with Kibaek. And what if she ran into him? She still wasn't ready for it emotionally. That conversation kept replaying in her mind. While she was picturing him in her head, Kibaek leaned close to her ear and asked what she was doing there. Startled, Siru swung her fist and hit him on the cheek. She hadn't expected that from herself. Realizing what she'd done, the girl saw who it was. Seol Kibaek's cheek turned red from her punch. He said he hadn't wanted to say this, but she was the only girl who hit him like that. Her hand was burning. Siru replied that she'd asked him many times not to scare her like that. She apologized and was about to leave. Kibaek called after her, asking if she always hit someone and then just ran away. She answered that she was in a hurry. Their friends who came up teased him. One of them asked why he looked so confused. It wasn't the first time. When they got closer, Kibaek told them to look at him. The guys were a bit taken aback by that. Then he asked if they really wanted to punch him. They probably hadn't expected that question. Blushing, the guys all replied in unison that he was probably asking for it himself with that pretty face. The guy quietly asked himself if Siru really liked him. The guys asked what he said, but Kibaek ignored them. Meanwhile, Siru was already walking down the hallway to the classroom. She had just made things worse with Seol Kibaek. She couldn't get the guy out of her head. It was becoming unbearable. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone notification. It was Cha Gukwa. He asked her to cover for him in class because he wouldn't be able to come to the university today. Right now, his attendance worried her the least. It seemed Gukwa had decided to stay for another semester. While replying to her friend, she didn't notice Cho Cheong standing in front of her. They bumped into each other. It scared Siru. She asked why he was blocking the door and why they kept running into each other. He replied that he hadn't noticed he was standing in front of the door. The girl asked what he could be thinking about then. Chung said he didn't know where to sit. Seeing free seats, the girl suggested they sit together. The guy asked if she usually sat with Gukwa. Siru replied that Gukwa wouldn't be there, and she didn't know anyone else. Taking a yellow macaron from his pocket, Chung offered it to her, asking if she wanted it. Taking it, the girl thanked him, adding that it might cheer her up a bit, because she was really down. The guy asked what had happened. Siru replied that lately some really strange things had been happening to her. The girl unwrapped the macaron and put it in her mouth. It turned out to be quite crunchy and very tasty. Cho Cheong watched closely as she chewed it with pleasure. A quiet chuckle escaped his throat. Thinking out loud, Siru said she had behaved badly toward Kibaek. The guy asked if she meant that night. The girl agreed. Suddenly, she realized what had happened and was shocked that Chung knew about the situation. Then she remembered that Gukwa had asked him to walk her home that day. Now everything made sense. If he knew about the situation with Kibaek, then he must have seen them kiss. Siru didn't know what to do with herself. From this thought, she choked on a crumb of the macaron. Chung kindly offered her his iced coffee. Siru thanked him, saying she just needed to pull out the straw. She tried to do it with trembling hands, but the guy asked why bother, since they had already kissed anyway. Hearing this, the girl froze in shock. Siru asked him again, carefully pronouncing every word. Chung nodded. After that, they stayed silent until the end of class. When everyone started leaving, the girl stopped him and asked if they could talk. Chung hesitated but agreed. After thinking for a bit, Siru suddenly yelled, asking if he had really seen her kissing Kibaek. She continued, asking what exactly he meant by what he'd said. Chung looked at her, deep in thought. Finally, he said she should stop drinking because it seemed everything in her head had gotten mixed up. Taking the bandage off his lower lip, the guy asked if she didn't remember that bite because she was the one who had left it. Then the girl started to realize that night it wasn't Seol Kibaek who was with her, but Cho Cheong. It was him she had kissed. Shiru blushed, asking him why he was only telling her this now. She felt like the ground was slipping from under her feet. After a short pause, the guy replied that he thought she was pretending not to remember anything from that evening. He added that, besides, they hadn't really had a chance to properly talk about it until now. Shiru yelled at him. Their friends in the workshop heard her shout. They decided to check what the noise was about in case there was a fight. Coming out into the university corridor, they saw Shiru throwing her bag at Chung's shoulder, still shouting. The girl said she had been going crazy from all kinds of thoughts, replaying that day, and he had known everything but stayed silent. While he kept quiet, she had been trying to figure everything out on her own. Tears started streaming down her face uncontrollably. Just as Chung was about to calm her down, Kibaek appeared on the stairs and asked them what had happened. The guy began asking questions about the situation, but then, suddenly, he noticed something was wrong with Shiru. When Kibaek wanted to ask if she was crying, the girl ran down the stairs toward the exit without saying anything to them. When she was out of sight, he asked Chung what had happened. Had they had a fight or something? Chung replied that they hadn't fought. Shiru had just gotten angry. Kibaek suggested they run after her. Chung asked if the guy had talked with Shiru about what happened on Thursday night. Kibaek confirmed that he had. Then he, startled, asked if Cho Cheong had told her that he also knew about what had happened. The guy nodded. Kibaek replied that, even though it was Kong Shiru, he still felt embarrassed, and it seemed like she didn't remember anything. Cho Cheong agreed, adding that it felt wrong to be the only one who remembered everything from that night's conversation. Luckily, the day's classes were over and the building was nearly empty, so no one saw Shiru crying. But they still had to work on the group project. Shiru kept replaying her conversation with Cho Cheong in her head. She had to go to the workshop. When she entered the room, it was as if she was ready to start a fight. The guys were shocked by her mood. Kibaek quietly told Chung that he didn't know everything that had happened, but he should probably apologize first. Then he turned to Shiru and asked her to go home and get some rest. They could manage without her. The girl replied that she'd heard an extra pair of hands wouldn't hurt, so she'd leave right after they finished. Feeling the tension in the room, Kibaek hoped they could still work calmly as a team afterward. Their conversation was interrupted when Gukwa came into the workshop in a great mood, saying he was back. Also sensing the tension in the room, he went over to Siho and asked what had happened while he was gone. The class president whispered everything that had happened after classes into his ear. Gukwa listened carefully. Then the guy came over to the table, set down a package, and, unwrapping it, suggested they take a snack break. Taking one of the rice cakes, he offered it to Shiru, telling her to open her mouth, but the girl refused. Gukwa said his grandmother had made the rice flour herself and shaped the paramteok by hand. Looking at each other, the guys all said in unison that they definitely wanted to try them. Gukwa was happy to hear it. The girl decided she should at least try the rice cakes. They turned out to be very tasty, and she told Gukwa so. After eating, Kibaek mentioned that it was really hard to peel off all the foam crumbs after working with them. Last year, he hadn't ordered the university bomber jacket, so he suggested they all put on their own jackets instead. The whole group put on their pink bombers. Shiru stood next to Chung. He actually looked quite cute in his. Kibaek called Chung over to help him with the hot wire cutter, and they asked Gukwa to hold the foam in place. The others had to make sure the side edges stayed parallel. They had to work smoothly together. Shiru decided that, while she had time, she should think through everything from the very beginning. She remembered her talk with Chung. She hadn't realized that, from the outside, it might have looked like she was pretending not to remember anything. It was strange that Chung suddenly brought it up after 3 days. Maybe he had been waiting for her to mention it first? But why did he think she would bring it up? Maybe he only said it now because he had something on his mind. Cho Cheong and Seol Kibaek noticed Shiru's intense gaze. They both turned questioning looks toward her at the same time. Standing up from his knees, Kibaek asked her if she was catching flies. Shiru replied that she was just observing. Shiru felt awkward under the unexpected looks from the guys. She didn't understand why the room felt so tense. But the worst part was that she was stuck in these 4 walls with witnesses to her embarrassing behavior all night. She should have listened to Seol Kibaek and gone home. Meanwhile, Siho was correcting the guy's movements with the hot wire cutter. Shiru got lost in thought again. Then where did Kibaek get the cut on his lip? It seemed like Chung knew what had happened that day. Remembering Chung's words about drinking, the girl thought maybe she should ask him about everything that happened that night. After 4 hours of work, the friends had cut out a cube and then rounded off the corners. The work had exhausted everyone. Gukwa asked Jibak if they could consider half the work done now, but the guy replied that this was only the beginning. It was time to start sanding. It seemed Kibaek had been wrong when he'd said it would take 15 hours of work. He said that first they needed to sand the layer with sandpaper to get the right diameter. They had to remember, if the diameter of the layer ended up being less than 20 centimeters, they'd have to start over. Kibaek suggested they take turns doing it. Shiru volunteered to go first. Gukwa thought it was a brave move. Then he added that he and Siho would go to the store. The girl hadn't expected that the guy wanted to go with her. Gukwa asked the others if they wanted anything. Shiru and Kibaek asked for an energy drink and Chung wanted an Americano. Shiru started sanding the sphere. Opposite her sat Jibak and Chung. Being around them felt like a trial to her. She was too tired. She just wanted to finish quickly and go home. The guys watched her closely. Suddenly, Jibak spoke to Shiru and Chung. The girl got nervous, but then his friend walked into the workshop. It was Miri. He asked Kibaek to help them in the next workshop. The guy hesitated since he'd wanted to talk. Shiru told him not to worry and to go help his friend. She and Chung would be careful with the sphere. The girl and Cho Cheong were left alone in the workshop. She couldn't stop the thoughts swirling in her head. They sat in silence, but Shiru couldn't take it anymore. She spoke up, suggesting they talk right now. Shiru apologized for snapping at him like that. She had been very nervous, and it had happened accidentally. Chung listened. Honestly, even though Shiru still didn't fully understand how it had happened, she admitted she was wrong to hit him. Chung interrupted her, asking if she hadn't overdone it with the sandpaper. It looked like the sphere had shrunk. Measuring the diameter, it was still 20.5 centimeters. The girl scolded the guy. He had scared her. Cho Cheong apologized for what had happened recently. He admitted he shouldn't have said all those things. He apologized several times. Kong Shiru thanked him for apologizing and confessed she didn't remember anything from that day at all. The girl added that she remembered sitting in the bar with Gukwa over soju, and after that, her memories just cut off. Shiru asked the guy to tell her everything that had happened then, without skipping even the smallest details. He agreed. Chung said that that evening he had been standing not far from the bar where she and Gukwa were, waiting for a friend. At that moment, Gukwa came up to him. He asked if Chung had anything else to do. The guy didn't understand what he meant. Then Gukwa explained that Shiru was in the bar, very drunk, and unfortunately, he couldn't walk her home. He had to finish writing a report he hadn't even started, and it wouldn't be right to leave the girl alone in that state. Gukwa added that, although she was tough, he still worried about her and didn't want to leave his friend alone. Chung agreed to watch over Shiru and walk her home. He couldn't leave a friend like that in such a condition. Entering the bar, the guy noticed the girl. She was sitting at one of the tables, resting her head on it. Approaching her, Chung called out to the girl. Shiru lifted her head and was surprised to see him. The girl started calling him Cho Cheong. She added that this way of saying his name sounded quite cute to her. Shiru was tense because Gukwa had said he'd just gone to the bathroom but still hadn't come back. Maybe he felt sick. Chung explained where Gukwa had really gone. This made the girl angry. She said then she would go to his place. Standing up, the girl headed for the exit, completely forgetting her bag. So the guy had to pick it up for her. At the cashier, instead of her credit card, Shiru handed over a plastic ID card, which the bartender pointed out. So the guy had to pay instead of her, but she was already rushing for the door without stopping. Chung hurried after the loud noises outside. Coming out, he asked if she was okay. The girl said she was fine. Walking down the street, the guy asked if they still had far to go. Shiru replied they were heading to Kibaek's house. The guy told her that maybe she should just go home now, since he also had his own things to do. Hearing this, the girl stopped and asked if she was annoying him. The guy replied that it wasn't like that at all. Suddenly, the girl's attention was drawn to a group of friends that included Seol Kibaek. It was an unexpected meeting. Cho Cheong asked if Shiru wanted to go say hello. The girl silently turned and headed toward the group. A few seconds later, the girl was already next to Kibaek. She hit him hard on the left cheek with her fist. Hearing this part of the story, Shiru was horrified. She asked Chung not to tell her any more of it. She asked if he wasn't exaggerating the details. The guy replied that he was telling the truth exactly as it had happened. Chung shocked the girl by adding that this wasn't even everything from that night. Kong Shiru felt she couldn't bear it. The guy said her punch had been so strong that Seol Kibaek couldn't keep his balance and fell. The guy didn't understand why the girl had acted so suddenly. Shiru wanted to say something, but Chung stopped her. He pressed his palm against her mouth and asked Kibaek if he was okay, explaining that Shiru was very drunk. Kibaek had already gotten up and was ready to hit her back, but Chung calmed him down, saying she was still a girl. Cho Cheong asked Kibaek if he knew where Shiru lived and asked him to help walk her home. The guy agreed. Cho Cheong took the girl by the arms and Seol Kibaek took her by the legs. They figured out what to do just by exchanging a glance. Kibaek's friends were upset that he had left them. But the guy promised he'd walk her home and then come back. Almost at Shiru's house, Kibaek couldn't stand it anymore and asked her to finally be quiet for at least a minute. The girl said it was because of him she got drunk and started cursing at him. The guy asked her to calm down. Shiru freed one leg from Kibaek's grip and started kicking him in the sides, which made Chung's hold loosen. He unintentionally let go of her arms. The girl fell to the ground, whimpering from the pain of hitting the ground. Shiru shouted at Seol Kibaek, telling him to watch himself better. The girl was very angry. Then she asked if just because a girl is tall, he doesn't consider her a real girl. The guy didn't understand what she meant. The girl added that if he didn't like her, he should just say so. Why did she even fall in love with him? The guys exchanged glances, and then Seol Kibaek asked her to repeat what she had just said. Shiru shouted again, repeating that she was in love with Seol Kibaek. The guys were stunned by her honesty. When the girl heard this come out of Cho Cheong's mouth, she was also shocked by her own courage to say it. Kibaek would so easily forgive her for all the mess she'd caused. The guy had incredible patience. Chung added that this wasn't the end. After her confession, Kibaek got a call from his friends he had left behind. He said it was time for him to go. He apologized to Chung for not being able to finish helping and left. When Shiru and Chung were left alone, the guy tried to hold her by the arms, as it was easier to walk her home that way. The girl touched his bare forearm. She told him he should put on his bomber jacket. She asked if he wasn't cold. Chung replied that thanks to her, he felt hot. Shiru made him put on the jacket. They stopped so the girl could lean against the wall. Shiru added that they couldn't let him catch a cold. Chung started shaking her by the shoulders, asking if she was so drunk that she had no idea what she was doing. The girl asked if tall girls like her weren't his type. Cho Cheong denied it, not understanding what she meant. The girl didn't believe him. She asked if someone like her could appeal to him, given his height. He agreed. She asked about being in a relationship. The guy answered that it was possible too. Chung was trying to understand her. Taking his face in her hands, she asked if he wouldn't mind a kiss. Cho Cheong didn't know what was happening. Without waiting for an answer, Shiru moved closer to his lips, adding that next time he should tell Kibaek this. Then she bit Cho Cheong's lower lip hard, making blood run down his chin. The guy bent over, screaming in pain. The girl watched and asked him how it felt, if it hurt. Without waiting for an answer, Shiru added that her heart hurt too. Chung didn't understand what he had to do with it. The girl turned and walked toward the stairs, saying he could go. She'd get home on her own. But the guy didn't listen and followed her anyway, because she was putting herself in danger in that state. Chung said that after that, he just walked her to her apartment without further incident and then went home. That was the end. Shiru was only glad about one thing. Chung had lied to her that they had kissed. In reality, she had just bitten his lip. After hearing the whole story to the end, the girl asked if that was finally it. The guy nodded, confirming it was. Then the girl stood up, rolling up her sleeves. She said she was truly sorry for her behavior. She had a look on her face like she was planning something. This worried the guy. He didn't understand what she wanted to do. Meanwhile, Gukwa and Siho were coming back from the store. The guy was struck by how beautiful the night sky was. The girl agreed, then asked if she could ask a personal question. Gukwa didn't mind. Siho asked if by chance he was dating Kong Shiru. Surprised, the guy nearly choked on his soda. The girl apologized, saying maybe it was an inappropriate question. Gukwa asked what made her think that. Then Siho realized they weren't a couple. The guy said it was obvious. There was no way they could be in a relationship. Then Gukwa explained that he and Shiru Nuna were like brother and sister by bond, tied by loyalty. Siho apologized again, adding that she had heard rumors they were dating and thought it was true. The guy asked who had told her that. The girl replied that it was Bang A from the visual design department. Gukwa told her never to believe that girl, since Bang A had spread rumors around the university before. As they approached the university workshop, the friends met Seol Kibaek. Gukwa asked where he had gone. The guy replied that he had helped friends with another project. Kibaek noted that they had done quite a bit of shopping. Opening the workshop door, the friends immediately fell silent. It seemed they saw something unusual or strange. Kong Shiru was holding a plank position and Cho Cheong was standing next to her. The friends immediately had many questions. But the guy quickly said it wasn't what they were thinking, and Shiru added that they had come back just in time. She explained that she had decided she must take punishment for what she'd done, so that's what she was doing. Standing on her knees with raised hands, Shiru said she would never touch alcohol again. The guys tried to persuade her to stand up. Then Gukwa asked what exactly she had done to those two that evening. He then added that he didn't expect there to be two victims of her actions. He was curious about what she had done. Gukwa realized why those two had come with broken lips. Meanwhile, Chung again asked Shiru to get up. But the girl didn't listen. She kept saying she would think about what she had done for her whole life. Shiru added that she would do anything. Then the guys said in unison that she should finish sanding the layer. And so after some time, the girl was lying on the workshop sofa, exhausted and trembling. The guys stood nearby. She had been working almost 2 hours without a break. Kibaek tried to stop her, but she heard nothing. The styrofoam had already taken the shape of a smooth layer. Kibaek praised her. They would do the rest of the project themselves. Cha Gukwa added that although Kong Shiru sometimes does strange things, she always finishes what she starts. Falling asleep, the girl felt cold, but upon waking, she felt warm. Shiru didn't understand when she had fallen asleep. Trying to get up, the girl realized something was weighing on her. But she saw that a bomber jacket was lying on her. But it was Kibaek's bomber jacket. Why would he cover her? His actions could be interpreted differently than they really were. But sitting fully up, the girl saw Cho Cheong's down jacket. It seemed the guys were using her as a coat rack. Kibaek and Chung stood outside. The night was cold despite it already being spring. Kibaek addressed his friend. He asked why he had come out without his down jacket. Chung replied that someone else needed it more. Cho Cheong asked if they had finished working on the project. But Seol Kibaek said it was only the beginning. The next morning, the group had a finished layer, but only small details remained to complete it. Seol Kibaek suggested the friends go home and meet later to finish the job. Everyone was very tired and wanted to sleep. Kibaek went with Siho, as did Gukwa with Shiru. Chung went alone. On the way home, Cho Cheong remembered that he hadn't told Shiru what happened 15 minutes after that incident. Entering her apartment, the guy laid Shiru on the bed. She was already exhausted when he carried her up the stairs. Sitting next to her on the bed, Chung touched the bite mark on her lower lip with his finger. It hurt unbearably. He asked his friend if she was asleep, but there was silence in response. He looked at her, and she really was sleeping. Then Chung said out loud that he was leaving, but the girl tugged at the edge of his bomber jacket, asking him not to go. Shiru held onto his bomber so tightly that when he got up from the bed, it stayed in her hands. Looking at the sleeping Shiru, Chung saw the trail of his blood on her chin. Why hadn't she wiped it off? Using the index finger of his right hand, the guy tried to remove the red stain. But then a thought came to him. Leaning over her, supporting himself with one hand, Cho Cheong wondered whether he should get revenge on her. But how would he do it? The guy raised his hand to her face, covering her nose with 2 fingers. Shiru started making strange noises. Taking his phone, Chung noticed it was already late. His friend, whom he had been waiting for at the bar, was calling him. He called Mijol. She was upset that he had left the meeting place and didn't answer her calls. Approaching the table, the guy said he would explain later why it happened. He spoke almost in a whisper. Taking a pen, he wrote something on a sticky note. His friend asked him to speak louder because she couldn't hear him. He stuck the note to the headboard of Shiru's bed. Chung told Mijol he was coming and would be there very soon. Then he remembered Shiru's recent words, that she would do anything they told her to. He thought over those words. The friends agreed to meet on Wednesday to finish the model, but not all of them would come. Only Shiru and Kibaek. On the appointed day, Kong Shiru felt very well. She was freed from the uncertainty of that evening. The girl went to the pharmacy to buy ointment for wound healing. Would that be enough for the guys? Maybe she should have scheduled a medical examination at the hospital and, standing in front of the doctor, told that story. She imagined the doctor's face when she told him that she had hit one guy in the cheek and bitten the other on the lip. That was definitely a bad idea, so she would just give the ointment and that would be it. But she was meeting Cho Cheong on Friday. Approaching the door, she saw a 4th-year student. Siru hesitantly entered the workshop. The girl addressed the guy, saying they needed to finish the project and asked if she could come in. He replied that she could come in, but then the guy asked if she didn't attend lectures with Kibaek. He added if by chance she was Kong Shiru. The girl blushed but confirmed it. It was unexpected. But then Siru understood. She asked if he was the one present when she caused that scene on Thursday. The guy confirmed. The girl started apologizing for her behavior, but he said it wasn't necessary at all. He added that there was something Kibaek asked not to tell her, but he thought she should know anyway. He told her that after Kibaek had walked her home, he had returned to them, which they hadn't expected. The friends asked how he was feeling, and the guy replied that the corner of his lip was a bit cracked, but he was fine. Kibaek added that he would consider it a small inconvenience that just needed to be endured. The friends were impressed. Hugging the guys by the shoulders, Kibaek asked them not to tell anyone about this incident, not even Kong Shiru herself. He explained that the girl had overdone it with alcohol and caused some trouble, so they needed to be kinder to each other. Miri also added that none of their classmates knew about that incident, even though everyone had seen his split lip. Probably it was rude of him to say this to Siru, but since she was involved, she should know. The guy added that Seol Kibaek often takes on a lot himself and likes to solve everything on his own. He said he didn't know what kind of relationship they currently had, but he would be glad if his story helped. Kibaek entered the workshop, which startled Siru. The guy apologized for being late and said he had seen Gukwa. He hadn't expected to see his friend Miri there. They greeted each other. Kibaek said they would be working. His classmate said he had already finished his business and left quickly. That was suspicious. Kibaek approached the girl and asked why she was still so shy since they seemed to have discussed everything. Siru replied that it wasn't about that. She took out the ointment she had bought before their meeting from her pocket. The guy said his lip had healed. The girl apologized for remembering so late and said she was very sorry. Kibaek said she had already apologized, as had he. They had both let it go. He would keep the ointment. He started looking for their unfinished model, and at that moment, Siru again remembered why she had fallen in love with him. She wanted to be like him, naturally taking the lead and protecting others, even when she was wrong. Gukwa appeared in his doorway. Kibaek told him not to fool around and to come inside to help quickly. He had worked a bit on the model yesterday. They only needed to smooth the shape, and he would step outside for a smoke. Standing outside with a cigarette, he recalled deciding to return to Cho Cheong and Kong Shiru that evening. He ran, hoping they hadn't gone inside yet. Passing a turn on her street, Kibaek stopped. Around the corner of the building, the guy saw Shiru from behind, and Cho Cheong was leaning over her. He overheard their conversation. Kibaek heard the girl ask if Cho Cheong liked it. The guy felt a very strange and new sensation. On his way back to the workshop, he tried to find a logical connection between Kong Shiru's words and actions. The next day, Siru was sitting with Gukwa, looking at the drawings they had done for this week's project submission. They were thinking about taking art courses but wondered why they had to pay for extra classes. It wasn't fair to pay for the university and also for additional preparatory courses. Gukwa called Seol Kibaek irresponsible since he asked him to look at a drawing but then just left. Siru asked if he was good at drawing. Gukwa was surprised she didn't know that about her good friend. The guy added that there were rumors that when Kibaek first took this course, he was the first to get a Hassan. Siru didn't know what that was, so Gukwa explained it was a privilege allowing one to skip daytime classes. The girl was impressed that Kibaek got it, but the friend explained it depended on the professor's decision. Siru said she had never seen Kibaek draw, so she didn't know about it, but wondered why he was retaking the course. Then the girl asked how and why Cha Gukwa got into the industrial design department at all. The guy replied he entered this specialty because he had a dream to get out of Daegwalyeong region. He thought that after enrolling his life would be like a fairy tale, but instead he became uncertain about something. Then the guy asked why she enrolled in this department. Siru blushed a little from the sudden question. She answered it was a specialty unrelated to football, but Gukwa was impressed by that. She loved football. Siru replied that it only seemed so at the time, but now it seemed the reason was different. On Friday, the industrial design department submitted finished layer models. The whole course was nervous. Approaching the third group, the professor measured the diameter of their layer. The friends nervously watched him. The man announced their model was exactly 200 millimeters. He praised them for a good job. The friends' eyes sparkled. They rejoiced that their sleepless nights were not in vain. Kibaek praised all group members for their coordinated work. But the professor said they needed to prepare a layer with a diameter of 23 centimeters for the next class. The professor announced that next, they would review individual sketch assignments, though the topics were different. He turned on the drawings on the projector. Students with entrance exam experience handled it excellently. Seeing Seol Kibaek's drawing, Shiru was amazed at his artistic skills. She envied his talents. Scrolling through the course drawings, among them was Gukwa's sketch expressing love for the professor. Opening Kong Shiru's drawing, he added that such things happened too, then flipped further. This annoyed the girl. The next drawing belonged to Cho Cheong. The professor asked if the guy was present in the auditorium. He responded. Professor announced that Cho Cheong was granted a Hassan, and from next week could attend classes at his discretion. Shiru praised Chung, adding that his sketch was outstanding. All attention was focused on him. Returning to Gukwa, the girl expressed her disappointment because the professor had flipped past her sketch. Shiru added that she really needed to take extra drawing courses. Gukwa said he would go with her. After the class ended, Shiru stopped Cho Cheong, who was already about to leave. The girl said she had something to give him. She wanted to stand up when suddenly Kibaek grabbed her hand. He asked if she remembered their plans. Bowing her head, Shiru stood in the corridor before Cho Cheong, holding the healing ointment in her hands. The girl apologized once again, but the guy replied that his lip had already healed and he didn't need the ointment. Unexpectedly for Shiru, Chung asked if she felt comfortable talking with him. The girl froze. She answered that she was tormented by the thought that she had hurt him. The guy said he didn't mean that. It was unexpected for her, but she decided to change the subject. She said maybe it would be inappropriate. Finally, the girl said she was worried that he had heard her confession of feelings for Seol Kibaek that evening. Cho Cheong didn't understand her concern. Shiru explained that she felt very uncomfortable that her secret was revealed, but she believed he wasn't the type to tell others. Shiru asked him simply to forget that situation. Chung asked why she thought he would keep silent and that no one else would find out her secret. He added that she had been so loud that the whole neighborhood heard her that evening. The guy wanted to leave, but Shiru stopped him. The girl added that she promised never to touch alcohol again. She asked him to keep the secret. She asked if her repentance and the ointment would be enough. Chung replied that this was not nearly enough. The girl began to get nervous. She asked what demands he had of her to keep silent about that incident. Chung said she should free up time for him tonight. Shiru replied that she couldn't do that. The guy lost patience. He was about to leave, but Shiru stopped him, asking if another day could be chosen. The guy asked what business she had. The girl answered that if he wanted, he could join them. It turned out that Kong Shiru was playing soccer with friends in the evening. It was interesting whether Cho Cheong would come to watch the match. The first half ended with a score of 2-1 in their favor. Shiru scored the last goal. The friends were happy and thanked her. The friends went to rest, but Seol Kibaek noticed Chung standing outside the fence, watching them. The friends did not expect to see him here, but Shiru explained that he said he just came to watch. Meanwhile, the guys from the opposing team were trying to figure out who this girl was who scored all the goals. They were unhappy that she played so well. The guys weren't even enjoying the game. As expected, the second half ended with a score of 4-2 in Shiru's team's favor. Everyone was very tired. The girls saw that Chung was no longer near the field, but she remembered how after class they had talked in the corridor. Still, they agreed to meet on Monday, but he refused to tell her what they would do. After the game, the friends gathered to eat samgyeopsal together. Nothing could be better than a victorious dinner. After dinner, Gukwa and Kibaek went home together, happily discussing the day. A little later, Chuk Gukwa felt a burning pain near his elbow. It seemed he had scratched himself during the game. Seol Kibaek recalled that he had ointment in his bag. Gukwa was amazed that he even carried something like that. Finding the ointment Shiru gave him, he handed it to his friend and added that it appeared accidentally. Already riding the elevator to the needed floor, Kibaek said that his friend had a very strange situation. Gukwa replied that it was an old trick, but it was clear he was talking about himself as if about his friend. But Kibaek insisted it happened to his friend. He told that the girl confessed her love to him. Then, 10 minutes later, the friend saw the girl kissing someone else. So what was she really feeling? Gukwa replied that maybe her heart was very fickle, or the feelings were not genuine if she found a replacement. He advised Seol Kibaek, or rather his friend, to ask that girl what actually happened then. Entering the apartment, the guy immediately went to the shower. Gukwa was annoyed that he went there without waiting in line. But immediately, he ran out of the bathroom holding something thin and asked what Asiru's hair was doing in the shower. Taking the hair in his hands, Gukwa flatly replied that it was just a black thread, moreover a rubber one. Then he asked Kibaek to return to the bath because Gukwa did not really want to look at his naked body. Standing under the hot water, Kibaek wondered if Kong Shiru would now always appear everywhere he went. Meanwhile, Cho Cheong examined the ointment that Shiru gave him. He read the composition, instructions for use, and dosage. Approaching the mirror, the guy tried to see even a small mark from the bite, but everything had healed. On Monday, Shiru met with Gukwa. It was only the beginning of the week, but she was already tired from her part-time job. Entering the classroom, the friends saw Chung. He was already sitting at the last desk and took the seats of others. Sitting down, Gukwa noticed a piercing on Chung's lip. He called Shiru to take a look at it. Turning around, the girl noticed that he had pierced exactly the spot where she had bitten him. Shiru asked him why. Out of all possible places, he chose the lip. Chung replied that he just wanted to. Then the guy added that he didn't know how to use that ointment she gave him. It seemed like nonsense. Shiru said she couldn't believe that Cho Cheong found such a strange excuse. It wasn't a real piercing. Then the girl tried to persuade the guy to take off the decoration because it reminded her of that terrible evening. But Chung refused to do it. Then Shiru asked Gukwa to hold him tighter. The guy did so. The girl approached Chung, adding that she would remove it herself but promised to be careful with him. Holding his chin with her left hand, the girl carefully removed the piercing. The guy groaned in pain. Shiru began to get nervous. Maybe she heard him while removing the earring. The girl asked him to show her his lip. When Chung removed his hand from his face, the girl saw him sticking out his tongue. The guy added that he was sorry. He didn't think he'd be caught so quickly. Chung said she could keep the fake piercing. Shiru didn't understand what was going on at all. Maybe he did it on purpose to get her attention. Meanwhile, Bang A, who had witnessed the whole scene with her own eyes, asked her friends what was happening there. The girls discussed Kong Shiru and her behavior. They didn't like that she always made a lot of noise. Suddenly, Gukwa approached the group of girls. He called the girl Rumor Mill Bang A. This greatly offended the girl. The guy asked if she could guess her deepest secret dream. Did she want to be a tabloid journalist? Bang A got angry at the nonsense he was saying. She asked Gukwa if he wanted to quarrel again. But the guy replied that she was the one who first started spreading a lot of lies out of nothing. He spoke calmly and quietly. When the girl got irritated, Gukwa added that everything she says is empty rumors and doesn't concern her. Therefore, he asked her to stop spreading gossip and live in friendship and peace. Gukwa smiled tensely. Bang A jumped to her feet, saying that he himself was to blame for the rumors about him and Kong Shiru. Gukwa calmly noted that the girl just admitted she had been spreading rumors on this topic herself. He added that he saw no reason to end communication with a friend over this, and Bang A was too self-centered. The guy said she should continue to watch everyone. This irritated Bang A, and she decided to go to the restroom. Left alone, the girl talked to herself, but suddenly Kong Shiru came out of one of the stalls. She had heard everything Bang A said about her. The girl decided to ask if she had anything to say to her face. Then the girl asked if she was dating any of her friends. Shiru was shocked by such questions. Bang A recalled that Kibaek definitely wouldn't be dating anyone from his university, and Chung wouldn't go for that either. Gukwa was loved by Siho, the president of the industrial design department. Shiru couldn't date him either. Shiru didn't understand what all this was about, but Bang A continued that it seemed she wouldn't have a relationship with anyone. Shiru dared to ask her why she was telling her this. Bang A replied that she just wanted to make friends. The girl found this friendliness very suspicious and decided to refuse such an offer. When Shiru returned to the classroom, Gukwa said he wouldn't be able to go eat with her after class. The girl replied that it was no problem since she could go with Cho Cheong. She fell silent, not finishing her sentence. Shiru wanted to say that they had plans, but Chung showed a quiet sign, putting his index finger to his lips. The girl understood him and told Gukwa that they had no plans, so they could meet tomorrow. After classes ended, Gukwa said goodbye to friends and left, while Kong Shiru headed to Cho Cheong. The girl hurried the guy so they could leave sooner, although she had no idea where exactly. While walking, Shiru asked Chung what they would eat. The guy replied that she would eat whatever she wanted. Suddenly, he froze in place. The reason was very simple. Bang A was approaching with her friends. Among them was a girl Shiru had never seen before. She was the one who addressed Chung, asking how he was doing. Silence answered, and the girl continued. She was interested in how his university studies were going. Then the guy replied that he was fine and added that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Shiru still didn't understand who it was. Suddenly, a girl reached out her hand to Shiru and introduced herself. Her name was Rookie Ryu. a senior majoring in visual design. Smiling, she advised Siru not to be too friendly with Cho Cheong, because according to her, Chung was being stalked by a very jealous and crazy girl. Siru had no idea how to respond to something like that. It felt really strange to hear such words, especially during a first meeting. Chung didn't comment on it at all, and the girls said goodbye. He was about to keep walking when Siru, looking tense, suddenly asked who that girl was and how he knew her. That's when he admitted that Rookie Ryu was his ex-girlfriend. Siru was stunned, which meant Bang A had been telling the truth. The encounter didn't seem to affect him at all. He just said they hadn't seen each other in 3 years and that she hadn't changed one bit. Meanwhile, Rookie Ryu asked Bang A if she had purposely arranged things so she'd bump into Cho Cheong. But Bang A stammered and didn't know what to say. Rookie Ryu just smirked and said it was fine, that she was actually curious to see Chung after all this time. Besides, he was still as cute as she remembered. A little later, Siru and Chung ended up at a cafe. Suddenly, Chung placed a blank sheet of paper on the table and slid it toward her. Siru stared at it, confused, and asked what it meant and what she was supposed to do with it. The next moment, he handed her a pen and simply said, "Draw." His face was completely serious. But what exactly was she supposed to draw? Anything? That left her frozen for a moment. Siru felt embarrassed because she had never drawn in front of anyone before. Still, she decided to go along with his request. All she could force herself to draw was a tiny soccer ball in the corner of the A4 sheet. Chung let out a heavy sigh, saying he hadn't expected they'd have to start from scratch like this. Then he suggested she try drawing something bigger. Siru tried sketching a slightly larger circle, but then the guy's hand rested over hers and he drew a circle that covered the whole page. He told her not to be afraid, to go bigger, even beyond the edges of the paper if necessary. Siru was completely lost and asked why they were even doing this. Chung looked focused and answered that since she was planning to attend extra art classes anyway, why waste money when he could help her himself? Siru couldn't believe what she was hearing and blurted out if he was really suggesting giving her free drawing lessons. He looked her straight in the eyes and silently nodded. Siru couldn't believe her luck. Blushing with excitement and anticipation, she quickly promised she'd work hard and do her very best. Chung froze, because he had never seen her looking so happy and sweet before. In truth, Siru was overjoyed. She had thought Cho Cheong might blackmail her with the fact that she had confessed her feelings to Kibaek. But Chung admitted that while he had been angry at her at first because of her behavior, he would never stoop to blackmail. He suggested they just pretend he hadn't been there that night and hadn't heard anything. Siru was so relieved that she told him he was truly a wonderful person and thanked him for sacrificing his talent to help her. She even reached out and started patting him on the head like a good puppy, telling him what a nice guy he was. Chung got embarrassed and finally asked her to stop. Meanwhile, Bang A, her classmates, and Rookie Ryu finished dinner and decided to have dessert. For some reason, Rookie Ryu was being overly generous today. Not only had she paid for dinner, she also covered dessert for all the girls. But then Seol Kibaek suddenly appeared, snatched a bite of Bang A's waffle, and said that chocolate flavor was his favorite. She was shocked and furious. She started hitting him, accusing him of stealing her food. Rookie Ryu smiled and told her not to worry. She'd buy her a new waffle, and she could just give this one to Kibaek. It turned out that Kibaek and Rookie Ryu had once studied together in the same program. Then he left for the army while she returned later to finish her degree. She told him she had recently run into Chung. Kibaek immediately shared that after their breakup, a lot of rumors had spread around campus, though he hadn't paid much attention to them. He only knew that it had ended badly. Rookie Ryu waved it off, saying a lot of time had passed and she no longer held a grudge against Chung. She worried whether he'd be able to adjust at the university since he was such a loner, but earlier that very day she'd seen him with a girl. Casually, she mentioned they looked close and were walking together. Kibaek was surprised. When Rookie Ryu said the girl's name was Siru, Kibaek froze and said he actually knew her quite well. Late that evening, Siru and Chung were walking home. Her hands ached from how tightly she'd been gripping the pen and how much she had drawn, but she still doubted if she was worth his time. In the end, she promised the guy that she would try as hard as she does when trying to score a goal in order to get the highest grade and be exempt from classes. Chung was glad to hear that, though outwardly he remained calm. He studied her carefully. Then, all of a sudden, he asked if she was in a hurry to get home. Siru said no, but asked what he had in mind. More practice, maybe? She didn't get to finish because his phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, he apologized, said his plans had changed, and told her she could head home. They were about to part ways when a familiar voice suddenly called out their names cheerfully. It was Gukwa, drunk and surrounded by friends. He invited them to join and head to another bar for another round of drinks. Shiru got mad at him. Why hadn't he invited her from the start? And why was he talking to her so casually now? The friend supporting Gukwa asked if she was his friend. She replied that you could say so. After all, they were classmates. As soon as she said that, the guys let go of Gukwa and ran off, shouting that they had class tomorrow and that she should take care of him. Shiru was baffled. How could they just dump a drunk guy like that? Cho Cheong, as usual, stayed silent, though he couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu. Meanwhile, Gukwa grinned and said that now Shiru had no choice but to take care of him. It was her turn. And so, the group ended up in a bar together. Shiru felt awkward, especially since Chung had to tag along with them. Chung reminded her that she had sworn never to drink again. Shiru yelled back that it was true. She had no idea why she was even in a bar. But Gukwa groaned that he and Shiru had made a soul pact that could never be broken. As proof, he showed Chung a photo on his phone. It was a drunken friendship contract scribbled on a dirty napkin, stating that Shiru and Gukwa must always back each other up in their drinking adventures. Cho Cheong couldn't believe they'd done something so childish. Had they really even stamped it with fingerprints? Gukwa proudly declared it was a real friendship oath. That night, he'd even borrowed an ink pad from the bar owner. Shiru was stunned he remembered it all, since she had been far too drunk herself. She advised Chung to be smarter about when and with whom he made agreements. Gukwa just reminded her that it was now his turn to use that privilege. Or had she forgotten about 2 Thursdays ago? That jogged Chung's memory. Wasn't that the night she bit him on the lip? Quietly, he muttered something about karma coming back around, then asked how long they had been friends. Shiru replied that probably since freshman year, though she couldn't remember how their friendship even started. Gukwa looked deeply offended. He remembered every detail vividly. Shiru shot back that maybe he should memorize class material that well instead. Gukwa then asked Cho Cheong if he had ever heard the legend of soccer tennis. The dark horse, Kong Shiru. He started explaining. It was during their very first year at freshman orientation. On the first night, everyone got bored and decided to play soccer tennis. They didn't have enough players, so Seol Kibaek suggested inviting one of the girls if anyone was willing to join that late at night. Gukwa went to ask the girls, but none of them wanted to play. Plus, they wondered why he was looking for players among them at such an hour. Still, he approached one girl sitting alone and asked if she wanted to play soccer tennis with the guys. To his surprise, she agreed. On one condition. She was actually going to play, not just stand in as a backup. That's how Gukwa first met Kong Shiru. On the field, he introduced her to Seol Kibaek and the rest of the guys. Kibaek was skeptical, so he pointed her to the far end of the court and told her just to stand there. Clearly, she had never played soccer tennis before. The losing team would have to take shots, but he told her not to worry. They'd definitely win and maybe even pass the ball to her once or twice. Shiru thought he was a complete jerk. Then she said she had a better idea. Pointing at a kettle of soju, she said that if her team lost, she'd drink the whole thing herself. But if Kibaek's team lost, he would have to drink it all. Kibaek clenched the ball in irritation. Was she seriously challenging him? But he wasn't about to back down from some girl. The game started, and Shiru threw herself into it with all her strength and talent. The opposing team hadn't expected her to play so aggressively, or so well. Kibaek swallowed hard, realizing he had completely misjudged her. In the end, his team lost 7-3. Suddenly, Shiru loomed over him with mock sympathy and said his team had lost. Handing him the kettle, she told him it was time for his Gojin Gamper cocktail. She looked so intimidating that he asked who she even was, and why she was studying in the design department. Now Shiru was recalling that night, saying that Kibaek really had drunk the whole kettle himself. Just then, a familiar teasing voice sounded behind her. A guy asked why she was telling that embarrassing story behind his back. Kibaek ruffled her hair and said that after that game, the soccer club had chased her around trying to recruit her, but she never gave in. Then he asked how it happened that the three of them were sitting there together, since Shiru had gone off with Cho Cheong earlier. She explained that they'd just bumped into each other on the street and decided to hang out. The guys thought they'd relax a little, since last time hadn't gone so well. Before long, everyone was chatting happily. Kibaek started arguing with Shiru again, insisting that he'd been great at soccer tennis in the army. He'd just drunk too much that night. Siru teased him, laughing, and playfully agreed that yes, he was an amazing player. Meanwhile, Cho Cheong, who hated noisy crowds, felt uncomfortable, like he didn't really belong there. After a while, they started playing the drinking game Baskin-Robbins 31, and Siru triumphantly called out 30. Not really understanding the rules, Chung said 31 and lost. Everyone burst out laughing, and Gukwa promised to make him the best cocktail. With a grin, he handed over a glass, a bomb shot, just for Cho Cheong. Chung calmly took the glass and began drinking it slowly, steadily. The others stared in shock. Was he really going to down the whole thing in one go? When Chung finally set the empty glass back on the table, Siru gasped in surprise. He was actually a strong drinker. But in the very next moment, he dropped his head onto the table. Horrified, Gukwa panicked, yelling that he had killed Cho Cheong. Everyone started freaking out, until suddenly they heard snoring. They froze. Was he seriously asleep already? Siru remarked that, come to think of it, they'd never actually drunk with him before, so no one knew how much he could usually handle. Had anyone ever hung out with him? Siho answered that Cho Cheong usually never went anywhere or joined any school events. Kibaek said it was time for everyone to head home since they had class tomorrow. Gukwa whined that they'd barely hung out, but eventually agreed. Siru's phone rang, and she decided to step outside to answer it. It was her sister. Yesterday, Siru had been stacking boxes in the storage room, and the girl couldn't find one green box. Finally finding it, the girl suddenly asked why it was so noisy in the background. Was Siru already at a bar? It was Monday after all. Siru replied that she and her classmates had just stopped by for a little while. Hearing this, the girl said not to tell her that idiot Seol Kibaek was there too. Siru didn't understand why her sister was so against him, but Jabin scolded her. He always pretended they were close and then messed with her head. It was time for her to stop hanging around him. Plenty of girls hovered around Kibaek, and he gladly played along, but Siru shouldn't stoop that low. It hurt to hear that, and she tried to argue that it wasn't like that at all. They were just friends. Angry, she hung up. Jabin didn't know Kibaek like Siru did. The girl didn't think girls were always buzzing around him. But when she returned to the bar, as if to prove Jabin's words, she saw some unfamiliar girl talking to Kibaek. The girl was smiling and asking what department he was from and if they could meet up sometime. Noticing the irritated Siru, the stranger wished him a good evening and quickly left. Adding fuel to the fire, Gukwa chuckled and told Siru she had just missed the real fun, hinting at Kibaek and the stranger. Kibaek told him to shut up, but the guy kept teasing approvingly, saying he'd go to the restroom. Siru looked angry and hurt, though she knew she had no right to act that way. Kibaek asked what was wrong. Why was she acting so hostile? Had he done something to upset her? Then suddenly he asked if she had gone out to dinner alone with Cho Cheong, and what they did afterwards. Siru looked at her friend in confusion. But then she got angry and asked why he was being so annoying and why he thought she had to tell him everything. Kibaek tensed up in surprise, since when was Siru so sharp? Unable to hold it in, she shouted, "What about him?" Why was he so hung up on what was going on between her and Cho Cheong? Not wanting to argue further, the guy got up from the table and irritably said he needed to go out for a smoke. Siru decided to check on Chung. The guy only groaned in his sleep and couldn't answer her questions. She tried to suggest he stay over at Gukwa's place. His phone kept ringing nonstop, and warning him she'd answer, she picked up. What if it was something important? The screen showed the name Mijeol In. Who could that be? Siru answered and said Cho Cheong couldn't talk right now, but she could pass on a message. Suddenly, a woman's voice asked if this was Kong Shiru on the phone and what the two of them were doing right now. Siru didn't understand how this girl knew her name, but replied that they weren't alone. They were with friends at a bar. Chung had gotten drunk, and if the girl could send his home address, they'd put him in a taxi. The woman's voice drew out a thoughtful, then asked Siru to give her phone number. As soon as she did, the line cut off. A moment later, Siru received a text on her personal phone with Cho Cheong's address. All she could think was, what the hell was going on? Siru lifted her head from the table, worried Chung might hurt himself. She thought he wasn't drunk but had actually lost consciousness. She reached out to his face, wanting to check if he was okay, if he hadn't hurt himself. But Chung caught her hand and mumbled that she couldn't do that. That didn't stop Siru. She decided to take off his glasses to check his face. Who even wore sunglasses indoors? Suddenly, Chung half opened his eyes and caught her hand again. His lips brushed her palm as he said he was fine. Siru felt goosebumps and replied that if so, he could let go of her hand. Why did he drink if he couldn't handle it? If she'd known it would be like this, they would have left earlier. But he didn't let go. Turning his head toward her, he said he thought it would be fun. After all, being around her was always fun, and he wanted to see her smile. Siru blushed. What was even with him? Why was he suddenly saying things like this? Suddenly, Gukwa and Siho appeared, almost catching that interesting moment. The guy asked why she was sitting in his seat. She quickly said they had to send Cho Cheong home. Gukwa replied he could just crash at his place, but she insisted that Chung wanted to go home. In reality, he was quite tall and broad. Even for Gukwa, it would have been hard to drag him to a taxi alone. Meanwhile, Seol Kibaek was smoking irritably outside, replaying his last conversation with Siru. Who even cared what was going on between those two? Suddenly, he heard familiar voices. Gukwa was warning Siru that she was about to fall. The girl was carrying the heavy Cho Cheong on her back, barely able to breathe. Behind them, Gukwa joked that she was his superhero. Seeing this scene, Kibaek dropped his cigarette from his mouth and yelled, asking why she was carrying Chung on her back. She answered that she couldn't leave him in the bar. Finally managing to get him into a taxi, Siru gave the driver the address. Watching the car drive away, she said she hoped he could come to university tomorrow. Standing behind her, Kibaek was surprised. How did she know his home address? Still angry, she shouted that she just knew. What was it to him? He still didn't get why she was yelling at him. After a bit more bickering, they all went home. At home, the girl put on a face mask and thought about what had happened with Kibaek. He really was popular. Tall, handsome, and charming. After all, she was just one of many who had fallen under his spell. That didn't mean he was a womanizer. She just hadn't noticed how other girls reacted to him. She flopped onto her bed and sighed, thinking it wasn't his fault that she had fallen for him unrequited. He didn't have to be interested in her. Then she remembered Cho Cheong's words, and strangely enough, they had an effect on her. Eyes wide open, she suddenly remembered their drawing lessons and decided to practice to reinforce what she had learned. She grabbed a notebook and a pencil, full of enthusiasm, deciding to practice what she had recently learned. Cho Cheong barely regained consciousness when the taxi driver once again announced that they had arrived at the given address. The guy didn't immediately understand where he was until a familiar figure tapped on the car window. The girl smiled and told him to get out of the car. The next morning, Siru read in the group chat that Chung was already in the studio. Unexpectedly, he had arrived earlier than everyone else, even though the night before he could barely move. After some time, smiling brightly, the girl threw open the door and cheerfully greeted the guy. She hoped to catch him there, but to her surprise, the studio was empty. Coming closer to the table, she noticed a folder with a torn page. The next moment, someone gently touched her cheek with a finger. Turning around, she saw Cho Cheong. Siru immediately jumped back, covering her burning cheeks in embarrassment. How could she fall for such a cheap trick? She patted her own back and said the guy looked very healthy for someone who couldn't even walk yesterday. She had even had to carry him on her back, and now her whole body ached. Chung sat down and apologized. He didn't remember anything at all after drinking. But Siru, with sparkling eyes, replied that it was fine and pulled a folder of sketches out of her bag. That night she had practiced until morning and was very proud of herself. She wanted him to check her sketches. Flipping through her notebook, he realized she had indeed spent a lot of time on this. Had she really not slept at all? Siru raised a finger and asked if he was proud of his student. But Chung was strict and replied that not a single sketch had improved. She had barely progressed in her skills. Still, he admitted that she had truly worked hard and praised her. This inspired Siru. She started bouncing around him like a puppy, happily asking when their next lesson would be. She couldn't wait to study with him again. Chung's head started spinning even more, and with palms pressed together in a prayer-like gesture, he asked her to calm down. Suddenly, the girl placed her hand on his forehead and felt that he had a fever. Alarmed, she said he was sick and maybe he should skip today's mock-up. The sensation of her soft, cool hand brought Chung a sense of relief, and with a sigh, he replied that he was fine. The girl was just about to tell him that she had answered his phone call yesterday when the studio door swung open and a cheerful Gukwa walked in, followed by Kibaek. Seeing the two of them so close together again and alone, Kibaek felt a sting of jealousy. Gukwa kept grumbling that it was so cold today. Even though it was already March, maybe it would snow soon. Siru wanted to greet Kibaek as usual, but the guy just silently walked past her, as if she didn't exist at all. Was he really mad at her? But he was the one who started it. The girl stood frozen in shock. Quickly saying she would run to the pharmacy for medicine for Cho Cheong, she deliberately bumped into GBX's shoulder on her way out. The guy was about to ask what the hell she hit him for when a message came to his phone. It was from Shiru asking him to come outside to talk. When he went outside, he found the girl standing under the stairs around the corner. He asked why she needed to see him alone. The girl was nervous since no matter how much they argued, it had never come to such a serious quarrel. She apologized for being harsh with him the previous evening. Kibaek tiredly ran his hand through his hair and replied that she was right, and that he had gone too far as well. Lately, even he couldn't explain his behavior. He didn't want to look pathetic, but seeing Shiru next to Chung drove him crazy. That's why he had started fighting with her. Shiru didn't understand anything. Why did it bother him that she talked to Chung? Finally, the guy admitted that he had seen them kiss that night when she confessed her feelings to him. He thought it was just a drunken joke, but her reaction the next day made it clear she really had feelings for him. But what he had seen wouldn't leave his mind, and ever since that day, every time he saw the two of them together, he felt a strange unease. Kibaek fully understood that he had no right to judge her actions just because she had confessed to him, but despite that, he was furious with her. Shiru insisted that what he saw was just a misunderstanding, that he got it all wrong, and that after that incident, she and Cho Cheong simply became friends. Kibaek grew angry and started moving closer to the girl. What kind of misunderstanding could there be if he had seen the cut on the guy's lip with his own eyes? The girl tried to convince him that he didn't want to listen, that things weren't how they seemed, but the guy kept coming closer. Finally, pinning her against the wall, he gripped her shoulders and angrily said that in that case, she should show him what exactly she did with Cho Cheong that night. His lips were so close to Shiru's that she instinctively slapped him. Lately, this wasn't even the first slap from the girl. She shouted if he was out of his mind. Was he drunk? Holding his burning cheek, the guy finally came to his senses and realized he had to listen to her. With bitterness, Shiru looked at him and asked if in his eyes she was really the type who could confess her feelings to him and then go kiss another guy. Of course, she didn't blame him for the misunderstanding since it all happened because of her, but was he even interested in hearing what really happened? Because she hadn't been in control of her actions that night, something happened that she herself could hardly explain. But the truth was, even after his rejection, she still had feelings for him. Tears rolled down the girl's cheeks, and sniffling, she wiped them away with the sleeve of her jacket. Suddenly, Seol Kibaek pulled the girl into a tight embrace and apologized. Shiru couldn't believe she was in Kibaek's arms. Was she dreaming all this? Could it be that he had feelings for her too? While in his arms, feeling the beating of his heart, the girl allowed herself to breathe in the scent of his lotion. But the guy patted her shoulder and asked if she had smeared his clothes with her snot. Then he stepped back slightly and gently brushed her cheek with his finger, wiping away the tears, telling her to stop crying. Taking her hand, he said it was time to go back. Shiru couldn't understand. Did he apologize just to stop her tears or because the misunderstanding between them was finally resolved? Kibaek said nothing more, but from that moment on, the girl once again felt nervous around him. Soon she returned, bringing medicine for Cho Cheong, apologizing that it took longer than she thought. Chung thanked her and studied her closely. The girl looked flustered, her cheeks flushed, and from her gaze, it was clear her thoughts were far away. The group began discussing their project and got to work. But Shiru looked dreamy, her eyes fixed on the object of her affection. She felt a strange relief. When they finished working and stepped outside, it turned out it had begun to snow. Shiru smiled, lifting her face toward the soft flakes, breathing in the crisp winter air. Suddenly, a big snowball hit her square in the face, followed by Gukwa's loud laughter. He had decided to start a snowball fight, and the girl couldn't let his attack go unanswered. While Gukwa, Shiru, and Siho played in the snow, laughing merrily, Chung and Kibaek stood aside, watching. Out of nowhere, Kibaek asked if Chung was interested in Shiru. Chung looked at him carefully, then answered that yes, he liked her. Watching Shiru play, cheerful like a child, he added that she was very cute. Then Kibaek asked if that meant he planned to date her. He could feel jealousy and anger boiling inside again. But to his surprise, Cho Cheong answered that such a thing would never happen. Kibaek exhaled in relief and said he had suspected as much, that Chung was just another fool who didn't take girls seriously. In that case, he felt calmer about Shiru. Cho Cheong did not comment further. The flash of the camera lit up Shiru again and again. Wearing a short top and styled hair, she posed professionally, showing off clothes and accessories. As soon as that outfit's shots were finished, the girl shyly covered her bare stomach and asked how much longer she had to pose. She didn't like this style at all. But despite her protests, Jaebin was already changing her into another look. A light summer top with an open back and thin straps paired with low-rise jeans. At first, Siru thought she was just helping tidy up the storage room, but in the end, her sister forced her into modeling scraps of fabric. Jaebin reassured her, saying she looked beautiful and that many girls dressed like this in everyday life. Siru resigned herself to her sister's persistence and decided to check her phone during the break. Jaebin scolded her for still thinking about Seol Kibaek, saying she should have erased him from her head long ago. Siru snapped back that she knew better what was going on between her and the guy, and besides, her sister's lectures were ridiculous. They were the same age. Jaebin retorted that exactly because of that, Siru should act her age, 23. Instead, she behaved like a little girl in love with a church boy. Siru gasped. How did Jaebin know Kibaek was Christian? Jaebin reminded her that she was only looking out for her. Siru shouldn't waste time on indecisive losers hanging around, waiting for her to make the first move. She should kick him to the curb. Then, with a conspiratorial smile, Jaebin added that maybe Siru should try building a relationship with the guy she accidentally kissed. After all, they'd already grown close. Hugging her twin, Jaebin teased her, asking if Siru wanted to switch places for a while so she could handle everything her own way. But Siru quickly answered, no way. Graduation room of the Industrial Design faculty. One student walked in, saw Seol Kibaek sleeping on the couch, and loudly demanded what he was doing there. Didn't he have classes? And why was a sophomore in the seniors' workshop anyway? Kibaek reluctantly got up and said he was under stress, asking for some leniency. Resting his head on his hands with a heavy sigh, he remembered holding Siru and admitted something had happened, leaving him unsure what to do next. He briefly explained the situation and asked his friends if they'd ever been in anything like it. They'd studied together for 4 years after all. One friend tensed and asked if Kibaek seriously meant romantic incidents between guys. Kibaek said that wasn't what he meant, but the others were already standing up, insisting they should just go have lunch together. He tried to resist, saying he just wanted to lie down on the couch and mope, but his friends dragged him along, telling him to quit whining. Meanwhile, Siru wasn't paying attention to the professor's lecture. Her eyes were glued to her phone. Since that day, she hadn't heard a word from Kibaek and couldn't figure out whether his actions meant he had feelings for her. Sitting beside her, Gukwa tried to get through to her, suggesting they have lunch together, but Siru just mumbled to herself. Suddenly, she recalled her sister's advice about kicking Kibaek out. But was she really that naive? Out of nowhere, a text arrived, and she instantly checked if it was from Kibaek. But it was from the same unknown number that had sent her Cho Cheong's home address. The message said the sender was already on the way and would be there soon. Siru assumed the girl had just texted the wrong person. After class, on the way to a cafe, she kept wondering if she should message Kibaek first. Meanwhile, Gukwa kept suggesting different lunch options. Finally, tired of being ignored, he said loudly that either she came with him or he'd eat alone. The girl rushed to catch up with him, shouting that of course she was coming. But suddenly the roar of an engine cut through the air. Siru barely registered how fast it all happened. The blare of a horn, a car speeding straight at her. A moment later, the vehicle screeched to a halt just inches from her face as she collapsed to the ground in shock. For Gukwa, it all happened just as quickly. He screamed her name, asking if she was okay. Running to her, he shouted angrily, "Who the hell drove like that?" The girl, still staring at the car in horror, whispered that she had thought she was going to die. The driver's door opened and out stepped a young, pretty girl. It was none other than Mi-jol-in. Tucking her hair behind her ear, she smiled brightly and cheerfully declared that she had just scored a goal. She reached out her hand to greet Siru, but she looked like a complete psychopath. Siru's brain just froze as she tried to process what was happening. So that text really was meant for her. Suddenly, Mi-jol-in hugged her and said she was so happy to finally meet her, since Cho Cheong had told her so much about her. Siru, still having no clue what was going on, was completely shocked. That fragile-looking girl squeezed her so tightly she could barely breathe. Meanwhile, Gukwa, just as confused, asked what the heck was going on. That girl had almost run Siru over a minute ago, and now they were hugging? In an instant, Mi-jol-in shoved Siru into the car, saying they needed to go to the hospital and check if she was injured. It all happened so fast and unexpectedly that Gukwa just stood there, watching the car drive away. Had his friend just been kidnapped? Sometime later, Siru was sitting in an expensive restaurant, the table beautifully set, forcing a strained smile. Calmly eating, Mi-jol-in asked if she was okay. Didn't she like European food? Feeling unsafe and uncomfortable, Siru stood up and said if all Mijolin wanted was to eat, she should find someone else. She was going back to her friend Gukwa. But Mijolin's eyes immediately filled with tears. She said she just wanted to have lunch together and get to know her better, but Siru was treating her the same way Cho Cheong did. Nobody wanted to spend time with her. Siru felt sorry for her, but firmly replied that she wasn't connected to her problems, and she already had plans with her friends, so she needed to go. Then Mijeol picked up a plate of untouched food and said that in that case, all of it would have to be thrown away. Shocked, Siru grabbed her hand and shouted, "How could she just throw away such beautifully prepared food? That would be such a loss." But Mijeol calmly answered that it meant nothing to her, and she'd do it if Siru didn't eat with her. Admitting defeat, Siru sat back down across from Mijeol and agreed to stay, but only to eat quickly and leave. She hurriedly sent a text to Gukwa, saying she was fine and that she was at a restaurant near campus. Pleased that things were going her way, Mijeol suddenly asked how long Siru had been dating Cho Cheong. Siru froze in shock, her food halfway to her mouth. Then she exploded, yelling, why was everyone constantly asking about her and Cho Cheong? They had never dated and weren't planning to. Amused, Mijeol said she was acting like a little kid and that she was really funny. Siru stared at her, confused, and asked what exactly was between her and Cho Cheong. Casually, Mijeol lifted her pinky, making a certain gesture, hinting at a no-strings-attached relationship with him. Shocked, Siru couldn't believe she was speaking so openly about that, and that calm, reserved Chung could even be interested in such things. But then Mijeol suddenly burst out laughing and said it was just a joke, and that even by her standards, it was disgusting. She explained that she and Cho Cheong had known each other since childhood, and she was just curious what he was so obsessed with these days. Siru asked what did she mean by saying he was obsessed, but instead of answering, Mijeol shot back another awkward question. Was Siru in love with someone? Of course she was. It was written all over her face. Blushing, Siru replied that in any case, she wasn't about to share such personal information with her. Then, glancing out the window, she spotted Seol Kibaek walking by with his friends, and her heart skipped a beat. She quickly stood up from the table, apologized, said she'd be right back, and ran after him. She wanted to catch up to him and finally talk, since he'd been avoiding her ever since that day. Watching from her seat, Mijeol laughed. Was Cho Cheong really wasting his time playing unrequited love with this girl? Meanwhile, Cho Cheong called Gukwa and asked if he knew a girl named Mijeol, briefly telling him what had happened. Siru was running down the street, shouting Kibaek's name until he finally heard her. An awkward silence fell between them. Then she said she had been waiting for him to reach out to her. Kibaek's friends stood nearby, whispering that they'd seen this girl before, and that she had definitely confessed her feelings to him. Since girls confessed to him all the time, his friends were ready to watch the drama unfold, which only annoyed him. Siru tried to say something, but he cut her off, saying it wasn't a good time to talk. His friends were waiting, and he didn't want to get into anything right now. Seeing leftover food on Siru's cheek, Kibaek gently wiped it off with his sleeve, saying she must have eaten something really tasty. Blushing from such closeness and gestures, Siru felt herself heat up. He turned and walked on with his friends. When they asked what was going on between the two of them, he sharply said there was nothing. Siru walked back to the restaurant, unsure of herself. She sat down, but Kibaek's words that there was nothing between them echoed loudly in her mind. Mijeol looked at her closely and asked if she was seriously in love with that guy. Unable to hold it in, Siru burst into tears. Hearing those words hurt her. But even more, it hurt that now it felt really uncomfortable being around Kibaek. She had hoped they could still be friends like before. She worried that the old friendship was gone forever, all because of her stupid confession. At that moment, she looked just like a whining little puppy. So suddenly, Mijeol hugged her again and kissed her on the cheek to calm her down. But Siru tensed even more, confused and not understanding what the heck was going on. Didn't this make her feel any better? She yelled for Mijeol to finally let go and stop acting so weird. Suddenly, Cho Cheong appeared, grabbing Mijeol by the collar and pulling her away from Siru. He was out of breath from rushing over and strictly told Mijeol to end the performance. Her expression immediately changed and became strange. She mumbled that she should have chosen a restaurant farther from campus. She had been having a great time, until he came and ruined all the fun. Chung looked noticeably angry and told her to follow him. But she didn't want to and started struggling, yelling and insulting him. Then he grabbed her hand tightly, pulling her close to him. He started dragging her along, saying they needed to leave. Confused and not understanding, Siru tried to calm him down, saying he didn't have to act that way. Mijeol. In suddenly moaned and started crying, saying he was hurting her and that he should let go. Siru was tense and tried to calm them both, saying they could resolve everything by talking. Cho Cheong exhaled heavily and agreed, letting go of her hand. Mijeol. In hugged herself and started apologizing to him, saying she hadn't meant anything bad. Then suddenly, Siru noticed how the girl scooped soup straight from the plate with her hand, not realizing what she was doing. But a second later, Mijeol threw the soup right at the guy, yelling, "Here's my apology!" Chung wasn't surprised at all, looking like it wasn't the first time, and just said he knew she'd do something like that. Mijeol. In stared defiantly at him, while Siru froze in place. The scene unfolding before her was shocking. Did this girl just pick up soup with her bare hands and throw it at a guy's face? Then she remembered Rookie Ryu's words that Chung was being stalked by a psycho girl. So this sweet-looking girl was the one they had warned her about? Mijeol. In suddenly yelled that her dress was ruined because of the soup drops. Then she immediately smiled and suggested that Siru go shopping with her to buy a new outfit. But Siru rushed to Chung, asking if he was okay and trying to wipe his shirt with a napkin. He said he wasn't okay, and she said that usually in such situations, people politely say they're fine. Suddenly, Mijeol grabbed Siru's hand and dug her nails in, screaming, asking if she hadn't heard her. They were supposed to go shopping. She insisted that Siru had to go with her, but Siru said she was acting unreasonably. She didn't know what Chung had done to her, but Mijeol was acting weird and way too aggressive. Mijeol. Looked at Siru with a strange, empty gaze, digging her nails into her hand harder, and said that her words hurt her. What did she mean by acting rudely? Then she squeezed Siru's hand even harder and yelled, "Who do you think you are?" She treated her well, better than Cho Cheong, so why did Siru take his side? Siru tried to pull her hand away, yelling for her to let go because it was hurting. Finally, Cho Cheong intervened, prying Mijeol's grip and telling her to stop behaving that way. But she continued yelling and acting like a madwoman. She was going shopping with Siru, and nobody was going to stop her. Chung yelled back at her. Was she really going to keep acting like this? Their argument was interrupted by the sound of an incoming call. Mijeol. Muttered unhappily, annoyed at the interruption. Then she finally let go of Siru and, showing Chung the phone screen, said she was stuck and asked what to do now. Cho Cheong cursed and said she had no choice. She had to answer the call. Suddenly, the girl became very calm and polite. She answered briefly and then said she had just gone out to eat with Cho Cheong. Siru even got curious who this crazy girl was being so nice to. Then suddenly, the girl handed the phone to the guy and said she wanted to talk to him too. Sighing, he took the phone, held it to his ear and said, "Yes, mother." Siru got even more confused. Cho Cheong talking to his mother on Mijeol's phone? It felt like she'd been thrown into some drama. Meanwhile, Chung confirmed to his mother that Mijeol was really with him and that they really were at the restaurant. But when his mom asked if the girl had caused any trouble, he pulled the phone from his ear and quietly asked what he should say. Mijeol understood and nervously bit her finger, asking him not to tell mother anything weird. Cho Cheong replied that Mijeol was fine and behaving well, then ended the call. He put a hand on her shoulder and said mother didn't know about her antics but had asked her to come home, so it was time to apologize to Siru and leave. The girl immediately ran to Siru, smiled sweetly, and apologized. She was overly excited and had lost control, but she was sure there would be no misunderstanding between them. After kissing Siru's hand, she suggested they meet again sometime and hang out, then disappeared. A shiver of horror ran through Siru, and she thought she'd never want to see this girl again. Cho Cheong said it was time for him and Siru to leave as well and went to settle the bill. The total was so outrageous that Siru even regretted not finishing her food. Outside, Chung took her hand and asked if it hurt. She replied that she was fine. He gently ran a finger over the red marks. Regret flashed in his eyes and he apologized. But Siru said it wasn't his fault, especially since he got splashed with soup because of her. How was he supposed to get home now? He said he had left all his stuff at the university, so he'd just have to get home like that. But she suddenly declared that wasn't acceptable and that she had a perfect idea. Sometime later, Cho Cheong stood in the middle of the bathroom, taking off his dirty clothes. Siru knocked on the door and told him to hand her the dirty clothes so she could toss them in the laundry. Carefully opening this door, he passed her the clothes, and she told him not to rush and to wash up first. Taking off his glasses, he looked at himself and thought he never expected to end up at Siru's place again, especially under such circumstances. Siru couldn't believe how crazy her day had been. Almost hit by a car, rejected by Kibaek again, practically kidnapped by Mijeol-in, and then Mijeol-in threw soup at Cho Cheong. Exhausted, she collapsed on the edge of her bed, grateful to finally be home. Suddenly, her phone rang. Gukwa was worried if she was okay. She answered tiredly that she was home and too drained to talk, so she hung up. She hadn't even heard what her friend wanted to say and muttered that her life had gotten way too complicated lately. Soon, the bathroom door opened and Chung gently called her name but got no response. Entering the room, he noticed she was sitting on the floor with her head on the edge of the bed. He was wet from the shower, water dripping from his hair. Seeing her, he realized she had fallen asleep and was softly snoring. At that moment, she looked so cute and defenseless that he paused to admire her for a second. Why did she always let her guard down around him? Who knew what he might be capable of? Chung pinched her cheek and she let out a sleepy moan. When she woke up, she found Chung shirtless beside her. He shivered from the cold and asked if she would give him some clothes. She felt flustered and asked for a minute to find something that would fit him. The guy seemed embarrassed and continued sitting, covering himself with his hand. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door and Gukwa's voice asking why Siru wasn't answering his calls. The girl panicked. Chung tried to say something, but she quickly covered his mouth with her hand and whispered that they had to stay quiet so Gukwa would think nobody was home and leave. But to her horror, they heard the sound of the door unlocking. Then the girl remembered that they had exchanged passwords for the door in case of an emergency. Gukwa, worried, burst into the house yelling about what the kidnapper had done to Siru and whether she had fainted. Then he froze, surprised to see Siru in the middle of the room and Cho Cheong wrapped in a blanket behind her. He didn't fully understand what was happening, so he slowly greeted both of them and asked what they were doing. Siru understood how this looked from the outside and wanted to explain everything to her friend before he ran off. Suddenly, the blanket slipped from Chung's shoulders, revealing his bare torso to Gukwa. Blushing and accepting the situation as he understood it, Gukwa slowly left the apartment, muttering that Siru was naughty to pull something like this with Cho Cheong. Panicking, Siru handed Chung the biggest t-shirt she had and with tears in her eyes urged him to put it on and leave quickly. She hurriedly called Gukwa, trying to explain that he misunderstood everything, but he just said he'd keep it a secret. She apologized to Chung and promised she would sort things out with Gukwa. The guy said it was time for him to go, and that he understood she was tired and needed to rest. He also told her not to worry about Mijeol-in. He'd make sure she didn't bother Siru anymore. He said goodbye and left. Taking in the new scent, he realized the pleasant smell that had always been around Siru was from her shampoo. Later that evening, Chung returned home. There, Mijeol-in was already waiting for him in a cocktail dress. She smiled and said he was late today. The guy asked sharply why she came to his university, reminding her he had said he and Siru were just friends. The girl laughed and replied that she suspected he had lied, but she had witnessed Siru crying over unrequited love for another guy. It was both funny and touching. Wasn't that kind of hilarious? After all, he wasn't that different from her. Cho Cheong tried to warn his sister to watch her words and actions. But she was clearly having fun teasing him and said that if it was this entertaining, she'd happily have fun with Siru. The nightclub buzzed with fun and freedom. People were drinking and dancing all around. Only Mijeol-in was glued to her phone, refusing to dance. She even slapped her persistent friend because she wasn't interested in drinking with him. She was bored, tired of constant parties, drinking, and guys. Looking at her phone, a predatory smile spread across her face, and she suddenly said she had finally found something very interesting. The girl accidentally stumbled upon a rather provocative photo of Kong Shiru and smirked, put it a like. Looks like the fun is just beginning. The next day, Siru ran full speed to class and seeing Gukwa, asked why he suddenly started avoiding her. He replied that now that he knew the whole truth, he wanted to be honest with her and needed to keep his distance because that was the right thing regarding Cho Cheong. She immediately covered his mouth with her hand, asking him not to say too much. She pulled him aside, saying they needed to talk without extra ears listening. Alone, Siru insisted that her friend had completely misunderstood, but Gukwa replied that he saw everything with his own eyes. How could he have gotten it wrong? Gukwa had clearly seen Chung trying to wrap himself in a blanket after the girl undressed him. It had been a shocking sight. But as a loyal friend, he would keep the secret, even though she hadn't told him a word about their relationship, which hurt him. Unable to bear it any longer, Siru shouted loudly so that he would finally listen to her. Chung simply stained his shirt and came to her house to wash it because her house was closer. That's all. Only after finishing her furious tirade did she suddenly hear Bang A's voice behind her. The main gossip on campus asked if she was right in saying that Cho Cheong was at Siru's house yesterday. The guys around immediately started whispering. They had only caught the last bit about the guy showering at her place. Gukwa stood up for his friend, saying Bang A shouldn't be eavesdropping. But the girl boldly replied that maybe Siru shouldn't be shouting about her escapades so loudly for the whole hallway to hear. At that moment, Siru realized exactly what she had gotten herself into. She tried to persuade her classmates to let her explain, but the young people, eager to discuss the new gossip, said they had already heard enough. Turning to Gukwa, she yelled in despair, asking what she should do now. It was only a matter of time before these girls spread the fresh gossip across the university. Meanwhile, Jabin was driving, talking to her mother, complaining about having to deliver kimchi for her sister. Her mother asked her to take care of her younger sister since she lived separately. But the girl was annoyed that she had to do something like this. Maybe she should live on her own too. And why wasn't Kong Shiru answering her calls? Then she suddenly remembered that her sister's apartment was near the university. And it was the perfect opportunity to go see the guy her sister had a crush on, Seol Kibaek. Soon, she parked at the student lot. With a certain sense of style, she dressed flashy and attention-grabbing. Stepping out, she looked around for the design faculty building and saw a group of students deciding to ask them for directions. But as she got closer, she overheard them talking about Kong Shiru in a very unpleasant light. Bang A was speaking loudly, criticizing Siru's behavior. Suddenly, Jabin called out to them and asked for directions. The friends froze, seeing such a tall and unusually dressed girl. Bang A had never seen this glamorous girl before. Who the heck was she? The stranger lifted her sunglasses and asked what they were saying about Kong Shiru. Could they repeat it for her? The students froze, whispering to each other. Who the heck is this girl? And since when does Shiru know people like that? Bang A decided it was better to just ignore her and run. She told her friends they didn't need extra trouble. But Jabin wasn't backing off that easy. She grabbed Bang A by the collar, yanked her closer, and asked where she thought she was going. Clearly, nobody had ever taught this girl manners or punished her for running her mouth. Feeling the threat, Bang A quickly remembered Jabin was looking for the design department building and blurted out that it was right nearby. Jabin smirked, put her hand on the girl's shoulder, and said she'd changed her mind. Now she wanted Bang A to take her straight to one guy, Seol Kibaek. Meanwhile, Gukwa apologized to Shiru again for barging into her private life. Even if they were friends, he should have been more careful. Sitting in the stadium, Shiru admitted it was her fault anyway. She was the one yelling so loudly. Finally, after making peace, the two started wondering what to do about Bang A. That girl was basically a walking gossip machine. At the same time, Cho Cheong was taking photos for his spatial design project called Exploring Campus Spaces. Then he spotted Shiru joking around, play-fighting with Gukwa. He froze, phone in hand, just watching her from afar. Out of nowhere, Gukwa asked if it was really true that she had no feelings for Cho Cheong. Shiru quickly assured him they were just friends. But Gukwa wasn't totally convinced. Chung was pretty good-looking and a nice guy. Shiru swallowed hard. She couldn't exactly admit she wasn't into Chung because she was completely in love with Seol Kibaek. Still, when she thought about it, yesterday was the first time she saw Chung without glasses, and his eyes were actually really beautiful. Plus, his body was athletic and attractive too, but that was something Shiru would rather erase from her memory. And he was so kind, always looking out for her, saving her more than once. Honestly, if she'd met him before Kibaek, maybe she really could have fallen for him. The thought stuck in her head, surprising even the girl herself. Right then, Cho Cheong caught the perfect shot. She looked especially beautiful through his lens. Meanwhile, Kibaek was at the printing station when a classmate asked him for help. She was trying to print an illustration file, but all the fonts were messed up, and she had no idea how to fix it. He leaned over, showing her how to set up the print settings properly. She didn't mind at all that he was so close. Suddenly, Kibaek felt a chill. Someone had just walked into the room. He turned, and there she was. A stranger standing in the doorway, just staring. He asked who she was. He'd never seen her before. The girl replied it didn't matter, told him to just ignore her. But he couldn't. He pressed again. Who was she? What was she doing there? She clearly wasn't from their department. Then Bang A slipped past the stranger and ran to the guy, begging for help. She screamed that this weird girl came out of nowhere, claimed she knew Kong Shiru, and was acting totally crazy. Jabin ignored her, walked right up to Kibaek, grabbed his chin and said, "Let's size you up, shall we?" Studying him closely, she announced, "Cute face, plus, tall, also plus. But your sense of style? Absolutely terrible. That at least can be fixed. Kibaek, furious at being judged like that, shouted again, demanding to know who she was. Jabin didn't even blink. She concluded there was one thing about him that couldn't be changed. The way he clearly loved flirting with girls and soaking up their attention without taking any responsibility. Her words made him furious, but before he could respond, her phone rang. Glancing at it, she casually said it was time for her to go. With a wave, she left, leaving everyone completely baffled. But Kibaek was full of questions. He decided he wasn't letting her go without answers. He spun her around, and her sunglasses flew off, hitting the floor. Finally, he saw her face. She was pretty, strangely familiar. He squinted, trying to place the blurry image in his memory. Who did she remind him of? But the girl had already picked up her glasses and put them back on. If he was so interested in who she was, perhaps she would tell him the next time they met, if, of course, that meeting took place. Kibaek clenched his fists angrily. How could she say his sense of style was awful? When Bang A came up behind him, he explained that she knew industrial design majors had tons of mock-up projects, where clothes always got dirty. That's why he dressed this way. Truth was, he did have good fashion sense. He just dressed practically. Bang A couldn't believe it. Out of everything that girl had done and said, this was the part he was hung up on? He asked why they even came to him in the first place. Bang A admitted the stranger had specifically asked to be brought to him, even saying his name. Then, deciding to spill, she shared the latest gossip. Yesterday, Cho Cheong had been at Siru's place, and even took a bath there. Kibaek did not like what he heard. A wave of jealousy hit him. What the hell was going on between them? Meanwhile, classes were over, and Siru still couldn't get through to her sister. When she finally did, she asked why Jabin hadn't answered. She had 100 missed calls. Jabin just said she'd been trying to let her know she was dropping off food from Mom. Suddenly, in the crowd, Siru thought she spotted her sister. No way. She rushed over, asking where Jabin was and if she seriously came to the university. But Jabin assured her she was at Siru's apartment, asking for the door code. Once inside, Jabin smirked. She'd slipped away unnoticed. Nobody realized who she really was. She and her sister looked so different. Putting the kimchi in the fridge, she wondered why her sister needed 5 different kinds when she lived alone. The room was a little messy, so Jabin started tidying up, until something on the bed caught her eye. A man's shirt. Too big for Siru, and definitely not her style, especially since she never wore branded stuff like that. The realization hit her, and she chuckled to herself. Looks like my little sis isn't living alone after all. Meanwhile, Siru was apologizing yet again to Cho Cheong, telling him about how Bang-a overheard her in the hallway and now there might be rumors. He stayed calm, simply saying it didn't seem to be about alcohol, since Siru had a way of getting herself into trouble even when sober. Cho Cheong reassured her there was no point stressing over things that hadn't even happened yet. Let the ones who live in their fantasy world worry about spreading silly stories. Siru looked at him with admiration and said he really knew how to make an impression. His words calmed her down so much. Chung said they also needed to figure out what to do about Gukwa, but the girl replied there wouldn't be any problems with him. She had already cleared everything up. She thought how wonderful it was that Chung was taking all this so calmly. He seemed more mature and thoughtful than his age suggested. Whenever she made mistakes or teased him, he always treated her with understanding. Siru suddenly realized how often he helped her. He didn't leave her drunk and alone, he followed and took care of her. With Mijeolin, he promised to handle it. He even taught her how to draw. If she thought about it, he was always there in tough moments. A sudden thought flashed through her mind. Could all of this really be just coincidence? Gathering her courage, Siru leaned closer to Chung and asked why he was always so kind to her. The question seemed to catch him off guard, and he asked what exactly she meant. She started listing examples, how he had helped her in difficult times, and even agreed to tutor her for free. Chung leaned in so close their faces were almost touching and said that if she really wanted to know, he'd tell her. He began to say something, but Siru barely heard him, as if she were underwater. His face was so close, and her eyes were fixed on his lips. Out of nowhere, her conversation with Gukwa came to mind, and she realized he had been right. This guy really did look very attractive. Then she remembered how his face looked without glasses, those beautiful eyes. She even wanted to pull those sunglasses off him again. Chung suddenly noticed she was completely lost in thought, not listening to him at all. Snapping his fingers in front of her face, he asked if she was even paying attention. The girl gave him a guilty look. Cho Cheong sighed and said he was going to be honest with her. Hearing that, she blushed and tensed up. What did he mean by wanting to be honest? Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. This manga takes you on a roller coaster of emotions, from genuine laughter to a little bit of sadness. I really love how naturally the characters interact and build their friendships. Kong Shiru first comes across as a real tomboy with a strong personality, but over time, her sweet and sensitive side shows. How she blushes around Seol Kibaek and worries about their friendship. Seol Kibaek seems a bit unpredictable, showing interest in her mostly when he feels competition with Cho Cheong, and sometimes outright ignoring her. Cho Cheong is the dark horse, full of secrets yet so caring and sweet. It's hard to read his feelings, but it's clear that Shiru means a lot to him. The story really makes you think about the importance of choosing your friends and partners wisely, and seeing people for who they really are, not just through rose-colored glasses. And the humor? It lightens everything up and makes you laugh even when life gets heavy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this story and what manhwa you'd like to see next. See you in the next installment.